Hello and welcome to this round 2 of the World Magic Cup, where we have Team USA there with their bandanas on up against Team Spain. We have a fantastic lineup here, especially for this match that we're starting with. We have Seth Manfield, who just missed by the most narrow of margins, being Player of the Year in this last season, against Javier Dominguez, our current world champion, Matej.
It's a battle of the titans. You said it yourself, and I looked at the deck list. It's gonna be a big battle. They're both playing Grixis decks, so it's going to be card advantage, removal spells, and big bombs. It's gonna be exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the big questions when it comes to Team Sealed is how you split things out, especially when you have kind of one of your teams that's really particularly has an obvious hallmark top-level player. Do you give them the best deck and let them leverage their skill? Do you maybe give them the worst deck and let them mitigate for perhaps the power level differences there? An early Night Vale Sprite for Javier Dominguez means that he will be able to make sure that his draws just manage a little bit better. And starting off with Izzet Guildgate as well, all of his colors of mana completely unlocked.
Yeah, plus he has a Dimir Guildgate in his hand, so that's going to make sure that he's going to be able to cast all the double-colored spells that might possibly be in his deck. And I think he's going to play Thought Erasure, and he's going to see a nice surprise in Seth Manfield's hand, because Seth has a very nice bomb of his own. Unless...
Okay, so we have a Whisper Agent coming from Seth in response there. He just wants to make sure that that's one fewer target. What do we see here? That's Ral Izzet Viceroy alongside one Artful Takedown and just some mana aside from that.
Yeah, so Artful Takedown is a good removal spell here, and Seth might even use it to take down the Night Vale Sprite, but he sees 3 lands in Seth's hand. That's not a good place to be, and Ral hits the bin.
Yeah, I mean, fantastic start there for Javier Dominguez. He's got so much surveil going on in these early stages of the game that he ought to be able to transition into the mid and indeed the late game very straightforwardly indeed.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like Dominguez has a fair few lands of his own, not just the Dimir Guildgate he just played. He also has another Izzet Guildgate in his hand and a Swamp, but he's building up slowly and surely towards his top end, which is a City Watch Sphinx. And I don't want to spoil too much, but I think Javier has some really nice rares in his deck as well, and I'm sure we'll see them over this game.
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the hallmarks that you do see when it comes to Team Sealed is if someone opens a great rare, one of the players on the team is going to be playing it. You're not going to have too many Niv Mizzets uncastable within an entire pantheon of 3 different decks being played. And right now, with all of the different mana options available to Javier, when it comes to bombs, he's got a lot of them he could potentially be playing.
Yeah, the Night Vale Sprite finally hits the bin with the Artful Takedown. But Dominguez passing on 4 mana might look a little bit suspicious, but in this format we know that players do like Devious Cover-Up, and I think Javier doesn't have the cover-up, he doesn't have a Chemist's Insight, which is great in these sort of battles of the blue decks.
And, well, you mentioned bombs. We have found the first one of our bombs. Off the top for Javier Dominguez, he finds himself a copy of Niv Mizzet. Now, admittedly, he's played 2 Swamps so far this game, so this is not going to be your classic Izzet start where you aim at potentially getting your big bomb down on turn 6. But as and when Niv Mizzet comes to town, it really doesn't matter when it happens. Chemist's Insight on both sides of the battlefield here as Seth Manfield draws a couple more cards.
Yeah, this is like a traditional control matchup. Both players removal spells, drawing a bunch of cards, and we'll just see who has the better card quality. Because ultimately, in these sorts of matches, even in regular Guilds of Ravnica Limited, you find yourself going very deep into each deck, and you get to see most of your cards, and it's just about who can maneuver better.
So each of these players finding time to use their Chemist's Insight. There we saw the jump start on it from Javier Dominguez. So he's drawn 4 additional cards so far this game. Meanwhile, the life totals, I mean, they're almost not so important in this matchup because we are talking about very classic control here.
Yeah, definitely. And you can see, as you mentioned, with Javier having the 2 Swamps, Javier will need a lot of time to build up his mana to get to the point with that Niv Mizzet. And look at that, with Manfield's going for the card advantage route after those Chemist's Insight was the jump start at the end of Javier's turn. Now there's also a Notion Rain binning 2 lands. Manfield just digging for some action. He would love a Thought Erasure of his own.
I thought Erasure would be a beautiful start, and of course because Seth Manfield has access to black mana, there's every reason to think that at some point he might be applying all manner of different discard spells, and discard right now believe it or not, would be pretty fantastic. Almost the best answer that Dimir has to a Niv Mizzet.
Yeah, so it's now Javier's turn to be on the Whisper Agent beatdown plan. I'm pretty sure it's going to be quite short-lived, judging by the way this matchup goes, usually chock full of removal spells. Look at that, is it Guildgate? And now Javier is very close to being able to cast the Niv Mizzet from his hand. He just needs either an island or a mountain.
Nice to have options. That mana cost, it looks so incredibly daunting, but when you've got as much Surveil as Javier's deck has, he will have the opportunity to find those lands when he needs to, and when the dragon comes down, we've already seen it, it's just spectacular. Disinformation Campaign, that good enough to be deviously covered up. And the ability to shuffle in cards with Diva's Cover Up, potentially very potent there, though it looks like in this case, Disdainful Stroke means that that's simply not going to happen. Yeah,
Disinformation Campaign is one of the best cards you can have in these sorts of blue mirror matches, like to call them, so similar decks, one facing against another, because it just creates so much card advantage, because you mentioned there's so much Surveil. It's very easy to just get the card advantage straight rolling. And you can see there's not really much going on in battlefield in terms of creatures, so if Seth can stabilize the board, the Disinformation Campaign will take over the game completely.
Yeah, Devious Cover Up, it looks like there may even be another copy of it in Javier Dominguez's hand, so even if it works out that the Niv Mizzet plan doesn't work the first time, if he can resolve a Devious Cover Up, he could just get it right back onto his deck.
Yeah. But he knows that Seth probably has something up his sleeve as well. Seth has a bunch of really good cards in his hand too. So let's see what he starts off with. I assume it's going to be a Dimir Spybug for blue and a black, the kind of a traditional Dimir card.
And the Spybug, another way of just getting even more value out of Surveil, as if you needed any more value from Surveil.
Right.
Just that one of those mechanics that it pretty much works on its own. You don't need any additional help from it. But the Spybug, it doesn't mind growing a little bit every now and again. We are throwing a few extra cards into the Grumpo with that Surveil.
Yeah, it's cheap. It grows. It can be a legitimate win condition in these Dimir-based decks. Even though we know that Seth is actually splashing red. And here we go. So a Whisper Agent face-off.
Yeah, and that doesn't end well for either agent. Though let's see what the response is here to that Whisper Agent.
Looks like the Devious Cover-Up is going to get played here.
Devious Cover-Up number 2. Let's see what it's targeting from the graveyard. Devious Cover-Up number 1, always a good start, but Sinister Sabotage stops that. Really interesting to me how much counter magic we see from blue decks in this particular limited format, especially in sealed.
Yeah, look what is going on here. Not just the counter magic being so effective here, but the fact that Sinister Sabotage also surveils just means that the Spybug just grew instantly to 3/3, and of course the Disinformation Campaign is now back in Seth's hand. And I think Javier has been playing this a little bit slower. He even had a Gateway Plaza the previous turn that he declined to play because he was worried that Seth would be able to replay the Disinformation Campaign enough times to discard his Niv Mizzet. But now he has to decide how much he wants to dedicate, how many cards from his hand he wants to dedicate to actually playing out that 6th mana source for the Niv Mizzet that he needs. Plus, of course, it's still Javier's turn.
Yeah, agent on agent. Carnage there. Now along comes that Gateway Plaza, and yeah, it's a really interesting situation because a lot of the bite that's come from Javier Dominguez's draw has been defeated simply by the amount of counter magic and now the amount of discard coming from Seth Manfield. Even though I would say that Seth Manfield's draw on average hasn't looked quite as powerful, he's currently not looking nearly as badly off in this game as by any sort of reasonable metric you'd think he might, given what Dominguez has going on.
Yeah, just Javier decided to expand his board and counter some spells rather than deploying the Niv Mizzet earlier. And now he's facing off against not just the Spybug, but also the Whispering Snitch and Darkblade Agent. And Seth actually has quite a few cards in his hand, so if he does have a bounce spell or removal spell, and I do see in his hand he actually kind of has both. He has first an Unexplained Disappearance, which does give Javier at least some cards, but it is surveilled as well. And it just works really well with the board. Oh, and he just drew a Deadly Visit. Boom!
Well, it turns out that Niv Mizzet, just like everyone else, when someone comes knocking on their window, doesn't appreciate it one little bit. Draws a card, gets to shoot something, but ultimately the Deadly Visit proving just as potent on Niv Mizzet as it would anybody else. And this means that ultimately we've got a kind of a funny situation where it's a matter of who ends up being the beatdown in this mid to late stage of the game is going to kind of close things out here.
Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for for Javier to come back and win get set, because not just it was a trigger for the Dimir spy bug, there was a trigger from the Dark Blade agent, plus the Whispering Snitch also pinged in for another point. Oop. And so Seth also has the mana to deploy the Disinformation campaign again.
Yeah, Disinformation campaign, it tends to be the first time you cast it, it's just sort of, it's interesting. It does a little bit for you, but when you cast it the second, third, maybe even fourth time, gradually you get to pre-remove all of the threats that your opponent has before they even manage to get them onto the battlefield. A very, very potent card, and one that I would anticipate seeing in almost every Dimir deck that we see over the course of this Team Sealed series, just because it's an uncommon, relatively likely you're going to open it.
Yeah, so Guild Summit from Javier. He's drawing a bunch of cards from his gates and just takes a peek and scoops them up.
Yeah, congratulations to Seth Manfield there. And he was able to deploy counter magic just when he needed to. Every single time that Javier Dominguez decided he wanted to counter a spell, Seth able to go over the top, counter back, and get little bits of advantage through Surveil, through just sort of protecting his threats on the battlefield, and ultimately picking up game one for America.
Yeah, and very impressive. The use of counter spells and Disinformation campaign has been really crucial in this game, and it will be, I think, the theme of the following games as well that these two titans play.
Yeah, looking at the records of United States and Spain in the history of the World Magic Cup, United States, they have had a top 4 finish back in Nice. Spain, they've not managed to crack into those elimination stages at the very final element here. But we get a chance to jump across to one of our other matches here, and we see already Aurelia in play for Spain. This is in the hands of Tony Ramos Pascual, I believe, against Dylan Brown.
Yeah, and it's a Selesnya against Boros. I talked to a bunch of teams. They felt a lot of this format depends on like which decks could match up against which. And Boros is traditionally considered not that favored against Selesnya. But if you have an Aurelia, that certainly changes things.
Yeah, Aurelia has a habit of turning plans upside down. Ramos Pascual, as with Javier Dominguez, they have a little bit more experience when it comes to the World Magic Cup. This entire United States team, this is their first World Magic Cup. They won their first round, and here we have Brown just trying to keep the ship afloat against an Aurelia, and honestly, that could prove kind of difficult. Selesnya, while it is very potent in general against Boros, both doesn't have loads of answers to big flyers, and can't really race very well against the likes of the Big Angel.
Yeah, the Big Angel with all the abilities it has, it swings for 4 in the air, and even if it's not mentoring of target, it's just a very big and beefy angel who's going to take you to many victories. And it looks like Dylan Brown doesn't have that much else going on in his hand. You can see a Somala Wood Shaper and a Gatekeeper Gargoyle, which are okay, but really not that impressive on this board.
I mean, one thing I find interesting about the Gatekeeper Gargoyle in Brown's deck, I think it is quite a good addition to that deck. It represents a comparatively large creature, and this is a 3-color deck, so there almost certainly will be various gates. The Gargoyle is the sort of card that I can imagine there being a little bit of a fight over. All the artifacts, when you're doing a team sealed build, that can be kind of tricky.
Yeah, I mean, it's also, you open 12 packs, and you guarantee the guild gate in one, and plus Gateway Plaza is a gate as well that you can open in addition to that. So it's always going to be like which deck has the most gates, and can really grow to like humongous sizes in this format.
Ramos Pascual, a regular on the European GP circuit, and he's got such a powerful card there with Aurelia, Exemplar of Justice. You can see she's got Flying, she's got Mentor, don't forget about that one. She also gets to gain Vigilance and Trample and +2 power when attacking, and all those things when combined, it doesn't take very long to whittle down that life total. Brown on just 8 points of life now to a very healthy 24 for Tony Ramos Pascual.
Yeah, but Dylan Brown drew a key card that might seem unassuming. He actually drew another Guild Gate, so that means the Gargoyle is now up to a 5/5, and that can match up with Aurelia. I also quite like how you're able to reconstruct the game a little bit, because Tony Ramos Pascual is on 24, and there's the Centaur Peacemaker in play, so you can see it was Tony Ramos Pascual trying to be the beatdown and throughout the whole match, and trading his resources to get damage on the board. We'll see if he draws a way to deal with the Gargoyle here.
It's not going to take too much to close things out here.
No.
I mean, often it works out, even if we don't have these big bombs on the board, that in the early game, the Selesnya deck might take a little bit of heat from Boros, but then gradually over time it's able to deploy bigger threats that make racing very difficult. That has kind of played out here, even though it's maybe a little bit different to usual thanks to the big mythic rare on Tony's side of the battlefield.
Yeah, the Gargoyle has been a great play from Dylan, especially with that second guild gate that was able to pump it up. And now he can play the Sumala Woodshaper, maybe, even as a Rampaging Monument, so he can just deploy more, not just big guys, but can dig for a big Haymaker from his deck.
Yeah, the Selesnya deck, once it gets going, in terms of actually winning the game, it is pretty much going to the red zone to do it, not really known for its spells, apart from, I guess, pump spells. And you referred to it during deck build as being almost like beefy Boros, which means that the matchup gets a little bit lopsided the longer these games go on.
Yeah, and it looks like there's an attack with the Conclave Cavalier, and Tony Ramos-Pascual not willing to expose his Aurelia to a trick, so it goes. Then Dylan Brown goes for the Rampaging Monument. Yeah, and doesn't have the 8th man to play the Woodshaper, but he has time now. I don't think Tony Ramos-Pascual is very keen on attacking to this board unless he finds a way to deal with that Gargoyle.
Yeah, I mean, a Cosmotronic Wave here would be absolutely colossal. As things stand, the Conclave Tribunal will do almost as well, because there was really one key blocker that needed to be removed, and that has gone out the way. So now we're going to get a chance for Aurelia to continue her attacks, maybe even a Skyline Scout getting in as well.
Yeah, now, actually, I think Tony Ramos-Pascual is thinking about attacking with everything. Remember, he has a fresh-faced recruit as well that could be mentored on or pumped up with the Aurelia as well, but he just goes with the Flyers, I think. Oh. It's not clear what is attacking here just yet. Yeah, there we go.
All right, so we have a flying Skyline Scout there coming in. It gets mentored onto
twice.
Just the twice.
Yeah.
You know, why not? And this means that this is a lethal attack.
Yeah, it was really nicely identified the line to actually find a way to win this game. Tony Ramos-Pascual, of course, drew the Conclave Tribunal off the top. We knew his hand was just a bunch of lands here. But that was a really nice draw and also a great way to find the attacking line. So Aurelia growing up to a 4/5, it has Mentor, and that plus the Blaze Instructor can put the counters on the Skyline Scout and attack for exactly 8.
Perfect from Ramos-Pascual. Worth noting that Team USA has already picked up 2 of the 3 game ones, so very much still in the race here. It's one of those things that it's nice playing on a team, because sometimes it means that even if your draws don't quite line up right, you've got a little bit of a backup from your teammates. But on the other side of things, if you're the one that wins one game and you look across and your 2 teammates are down, you realize that on some occasions, you winning might just not be enough.
Yeah, and you can see the relief on Tony Ramos-Pascual's face. He was like looking towards the camera and just breathing a sigh of relief, because he knew that drawing that Conclave Tribunal was very important in that particular moment.
So now we get a chance to see Justin Andrus against Alexandra Calado here on our other table. So it looks like we have Golgari, straight up 2-color Golgari on the right-hand side of things against, this is where the Boros deck for the Americans ended up. Team USA with a pretty aggressive start here, fresh face recruit, Boros Challenger, and even more Mentor on the bottom there as well with the Stalwarts. And if the Boros deck gets to get multiple Mentor triggers on, it can get very scary. But right now, all of those creatures, exactly 2 power, a little unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, Mentor is a key ability in the Boros deck, but now in this game, I'm looking at First Strike. It's looking actually quite solid here. Of course, Cayado does have 5 mana to pump up the current Dissident, but the 2 First Strikers are looking pretty menacing, and Cayado just deploying Crawl Foragers, gaining just 1 life. You ideally want to gain more out of it. But as a 5 mana 4/4, actually does a really good job of stopping the Boros deck in its tracks.
Yeah, easy to look at some of the Undergrowth creatures and spend so much time looking at the Undergrowth that you undervalue the underlying stats. 5 mana 4/4 against a Boros deck, it'll get in the way perfectly happily.
Yeah, it looks like though that Justin Andrus has a bunch of cards in his hand. I think he's already preparing a Cosmotronic Wave for the long game win. But now for now he just deploys a Parhealing Patrol, which again, only 2-power Mentor, not something that you really like, but no Flyers on Cayado's side of the board, so that's at least going to be able to chip in over the next following turns, unless of course Cayado deploys something to deal with it.
Now, looking at Andra's hand, there's a few interesting things going on here. He's got a Lava Coil in order to get out of the way. He's got Blade Instructor to potentially set up a big Mentor Chain over the coming turns. And then there's a Cosmotronic Wave. This is one of the big ways that Boros decks win out, even in the face of things like Vigor Spineworm, these Kral Foragers, these bigger creatures that come from the other green decks in this format.
Yeah. The Vigor Spineworm is here quite nice because it's able to pump up the Kral Foragers up to a 5/5, so it doesn't get taken down by 2 First Strikers. Plus, it gets Vigilance, so it's going to stay back on defense as well.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one. I think that we're likely to see a few sort of relatively meager chip-ins here from Andrus until he can set up a Cosmotronic Wave. But at that point, wow, fireworks.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll just see if Justin Andrus can keep deploying his cards here. He has the removal spell is definitely nice, but even if he Lava Coils any of the big guys, his smaller ones don't really match up that great. You can see some additional set of hands on the table. That's Seth Manfield, the Player of the Year runner-up, just giving his best instruction to his teammate.
Yeah, it's so important having that team captain role, and I think we're likely to see a lot of team captains in the middle seat in order that they can give their teammates a little bit of assistance. While Manfield has not been to a World Magic Cup before, he has played on the big stage so many different times. Both Manfield and Dominguez, they have hoisted the trophy of world champion.
Yep.
And yeah, a lot of experience in the middle seats, especially for America, not quite as much experience on either side.
Yeah, and I mean, none of these players have played much in the World Magic Cup before, and especially for Seth, it's his first time, I believe, as captain, or possibly the year when he was.
This is his first time at Worlds.
Yeah, there we go. So, and there's been some good U.S. teams in the past.
Oh, very much so.
Owen Turtenwald was captaining the team 1 year along with Andrew Backstrom before Andrew became this really well-known pro these days. And last year, Reed Duke, Jerry Thompson, like those are superstars.
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, it's almost a surprise that Team USA hasn't got past the top 4 stage in this tournament. And this is a great year for them to potentially do it. But Javier Dominguez, home soil world champion, does not want to give these guys an inch.
Yeah, look at that. Kayato is already attacking with his Defcar and Dissident into a board that I would consider quite threatening here. So clearly signaling that there's something going on in Kayato's hand.
Yeah, I mean, there looks to be various straightforward double blocks here. So some kind of a trick coming, one must presume.
You know, we have to figure out the order, and the Gruesome Menagerie lurking in Kayato's hand, so he can definitely bring back something. Yep, so just a pump for this turn, though, putting this in up to a 4/4. He's going to try to take down the Boros Challenger, looks like. Yep.
I mean, that's a 1-for-1 trade that I actually really don't think is that bad for Collado at all here.
It's actually quite fine because the Golgari decks, usually, they don't mind trading. That's why cards like the Wary Okapi and Child of Night, these sort of creatures are decent in Golgari decks because your opponent kind of wants to trade with them. And putting cards in the bin for Golgari is just a good thing to do. And with Gruesome Menagerie and Kral Foragers in hand for Kayato, he's quite happy trading off the Dissident.
Well, there's a Barging Sergeant coming along, and that means that we're going to have potentially some pretty big attacks here. I mean, I was talking earlier on about the idea of a Mentor Chain. Ideally, you want to get a bunch of different powers on your Mentor creatures. And the Barging Sergeant, with 4 power, can mentor onto a Mentor creature. That means in subsequent turns, you're going to get still more and more and more Mentor triggers. And that's where things can get very scary indeed. Parhelion Patrol there, picking up a counter. It's the one that can fly in with Vigilance each and every turn. And now at 3 power, it can start helping its friends out. Yeah,
Barging Sergeant is an okay card. And you usually trade it down to like with smaller creatures, but as long as you get the Mentor trigger and get to put it to real good use in the following turns, yeah, you're golden here. And look at that, Kayato is actually trying to get maybe another Kral Foragers in the graveyard because he wants to get just more life gain from the other one he has in his hand. But he might just decide to go for the Menagerie here, even though it's not the full value Menagerie. It's still bringing 2 creatures back, and District Guy is actually also presenting some nice value. But he goes for the Foragers first, gaining 3 life back.
I mean, all these 4/4s against comparatively small creatures, they do a reasonable job of gumming up the ground. And the life totals being 7 to 15, it's not abundantly clear that Collado is in a bad spot in this game just yet.
Yeah, I think Crawl Foragers gets quite a bad rep for a card where I think it's just mightily playable in the Golgari decks. And you can see why against this board deck it's just so important to get the body and life gain at the same time. And a card is showing off the card right here.
Now, Andrus, he's still trying to set up for this kind of one big swing here. I don't think that he's quite there yet, being able to get it going, but Blade Instructor will help out in that quite a bit. Obviously, it looks a little bit unexciting in the face of the blockers on the other side of things just now, but I mean, between Blade Instructor, Wojek Bodyguard, just getting power on the battlefield is pretty important.
Yeah. And it will definitely be important because now with the Bodyguard, it's much more power to the board, not just as the beefy 3/3 body itself, but with the Mentor also on it.
I mean, we're looking at 12 power on this battlefield,
yeah, exactly.
On attacks, which with Cosmotronic Wave ought to be enough.
Yeah, so what Kaito needs to do here, I think he probably has to swing with both, because attacking with both creatures forces Justin Andrus for at least a block. So even though it might not look that appealing, because there's some double blocks which, you know, it just forces you to trade down to a creature that costs less mana, but at least Kaito knows that he can bring something back with the Gruesome Menagerie to be unblocked. And there it is, the swing with both. I like this play from the Spanish team.
Yeah, and this, as you say, forces the block, means that Andrus will not be able to get the full lethal Alpha Strike next turn, even with a Cosmotronic Wave to get rid of all blockers. Exactly. Nice play from the Spanish team here.
It looks like, I think the Spanish team also drew a really nice card for the turn. They drew a Golgari Findbroker. Just another way to put two creatures on the board if they need it. Oh, look at that. A bunch of double blocks. I think, yeah, it looks like Kaito will just try to kill the biggest creatures on the board here. So the Bodyguard and the Patrol, they're going to trade with those Foragers. This is a great spot for Kaito because now the board is just two small creatures, and he can definitely add the Menagerie to the stack and bring back two creatures. That will also bring him another land for the District Guide if he goes for that over the Okapi, which means that next turn he can actually Findbroker into Crawl Foragers and just make his board huge over 2 turns. Yeah, and there it is. He goes for the District Guide, also has the Devkar and Dissident. I think Spain is in the driver's seat right now.
Yeah, Ramos Pascual having picked up his game 1. If Collado can pick up this game 1 as well, oh sorry, this is a game 2, then it means that he can square things up, because right now USA, they do have a game win on all 3 tables, Brown having squared things up against Ramos Pascual off camera. So Golgari Findbroker coming along as we thought may be the case. That gets back a Crawl Foragers.
Yeah, it's a great spot for Kaito because next turn he can either try to pressure for lethal with the Dissident activation, but if Justin Andrus goes for some blocks, Kaito can just play another 4/4, gain a bunch of life. Yeah, he's in great shape.
The Findbroker, just such a gigantic body for that Gravedigger-esque ability.
Okay, it looks like the judges are confirming something about the attack the previous turn. Yep. I'm going to set the advantage bar way into the Kaito's favor here, because
I mean, he's had so much card advantage.
Yeah, exactly.
This game. I mean, we should not forget about Cosmotronic Wave. It is one of those cards that can potentially swing matchups, and certainly for the Boros decks against these green decks, it's a real matchup-defining card.
I didn't quite like trading away all your creatures the previous turn from the American team. So they don't have that much else going on in their hand, because we know that they've been holding the Cosmotronic Wave for almost since the start of the game, and you still want to develop some kind of board. But, you know, Golgari really developed the kind of game plan that is like prime anti-Boros material. Like, trade off your creatures decently well, gain some card advantage with bringing your stuff back, gain some life with Foragers, and just kind of like wait out the storm, and then just start barging in for a lot of damage.
Yeah, the Golgari deck, while it has currently got a life total advantage, in some respects, it's more about how efficiently it's been able to play its cards thus far. We see here a Direct Current sniping that Dissident while there's not the mana to be able to pump it, but even having done so, there's still just not good attacks for this Boros list as it faces off against these slightly larger creatures. No immediate combat tricks or similar for for Andrus there to make his life a little bit easier. He's got a Sky Knight Legionnaire, but didn't have the mana to be able to deploy all of his threats at the same time. Meanwhile, District Guide has meant that for Calado, while in other circumstances it might look like he's flooded, he's just been able to search up extra land while also getting extra creatures, and basically he's got the earth and everything on it.
Yeah, one of the things that it was quite unfortunate that Team US drew the Sky Knight Legion and kind of like the turn after they traded off so many creatures on the board, because Parhelion Patrol together with Sky Knight Legionnaire is actually nice punch, especially because the patrol was a 3/4, so it could have mentored onto the Legionnaire and really start taking chunks out of the life total. But now, speaking of life total, Krull Foragers gaining 3, and plus there's still Necrotic Wound in Calado's hand now, so Spain is breezing through this.
Yeah, Necrotic Wound, just an incredibly efficient removal spell in this circumstance. And yeah, Team America here, they've got the red, the white, they've not got the blue in this particular list, but the Sky Knight Legionnaire vying with whatever else is in their hand, because with just 5 lands they can't play everything, and Blade Instructor actually ends up being the pick here.
Maybe there's something else in hand. No, it's just the Legionnaire here, and I mean Calado is in a good spot. He does have the Necrotic Wound. I don't think he even needs it that much. I think he can just swing with his team, and if there's any double blocks, just use the Necrotic Wound to get some sort of card advantage in combat. It might not even come to that, because his board is just that much better compared to the US's.
So Calado just having a little think here. He may well be getting little snippets of advice from his teammates. Of the 3 on Team Spain, Calado, the one that he's the only player that's not been to the World Magic Cup before, and indeed just 5 GPs compared to 37 from Rames Pascual, and a whopping 88 GPs that Javier Dominguez has played. So here's Necrotic Wound coming from Calado.
Yeah, and I like this. It gets rid of the first striker right away, which means that it's also much easier for the District Guy to attack into this board, and just guarantees that that Justin Andrus, if he doesn't play anything, he will have to chump block the 2 bigger guys, go down to 2 with no board available to him. Oh, maybe he can get the Fine Broker through because he's on 4. But bins his creatures and bins his whole board. He scoops up this game, and this is very important because on table 3, it's one game apiece already.
Yeah, we might see a match that ends up having 3 game 3s.
Yeah.
On our table A, that between Justin Andrus and Alexander Calado, we just saw them. They're going to a game 3. Dylan Brown and Tony Rames Pascual, they're already going to a game 3. And then we're going to get a chance to see how things go between Seth Manfield, Javier Dominguez. That was the big one where Seth was pretty dominant in their first game, not because of necessarily an abundance of the highest power cards, but just the way that things sequenced out, especially with regards to counter magic, really seemed to favor the American.
Yeah, Seth Manfield did a really great job, but if there's one card that's good against counterspell, that's Niv Mizzet, Perrin. It can't be countered, and it's like such a pain to deal with. We did see Seth have a Deadly Visit to nab it right away in the first game, but we'll see if Javier maybe can find a way to protect his legendary dragon.
So both players with Guild Gates in the early game. That not necessarily a big surprise given that they're both 3-color decks here, but being able to get a Guild Mage down on turn 2 means that a whole myriad of options available to Seth Manfield now. He can potentially be surveilling more, he can ice down an opponent's creature, or he can simply get a few cheeky points of damage in here.
Yeah, I think going for those cheeky points of damage is actually quite crucial here, because sometimes in these matches you see both players like board in a bunch of counter spells, discard spells, and if you can start deploying your creatures very early, it's actually very important. So we'll see if, ooh, look at that, disinformation campaign from Javier as well. And while it's a great, as I said, it's a great card in these sort of matches, Javier is already facing actually quite a bit of damage, especially if Seth Manfield manages to find some way to surveil here and draw a bunch of cards with the Darkblade Agent over the next few turns. Yeah,
Darkblade Agent, one of those cards that's, as a 2/3 for 3, perfectly reasonable. And then you start looking at what happens when there's a little bit of surveillance going on.
Yeah, if Seth doesn't have any spells to surveil, I think that's what he's thinking about. Maybe if he wants to use the House Guildmage to surveil, to trigger the Darkblade Agent, signs against it, passes. I think that's because he has a Sinister Sabotage in his hand. So if Dominguez might be looking at like trying to get the Disinformation campaign back in his hand, and Seth wanting to counter that. So, but we'll see. Dominguez has a lot of cards in his hand.
Now, never happened available to Seth Manfield in his hand. That one of the kind of perennial answers to a Niv Mizzet in sideboarded games. We'll see it get cast presumably the turn before a potential Niv Mizzet could come down. Yes, there is counter magic on both sides of things, but
yeah, Capture Sphere countered by Sinister Sabotage. This will trigger the Darkblade Agent as well. Puts a land away from Seth's deck, and the beatdowns continue. This control deck going for the beatdown plan, and Seth Manfield doing quite well for himself. But now the shields are down, so let's see if Javier Dominguez can capitalize and play something big to get rid of these creatures. Oh, starts with a Deadweight. That's a good start.
I like the Deadweight here, even though it doesn't actually kill the Darkblade Agent, making it into a 0-1 functionally about as good. There's not too much that you need to worry about from now on. And Izzet Signet, it does mean that there's, sorry, Izzet Locket, pardon me, does mean that a little bit of mana acceleration, a bit of a color fixing in the face of potentially the Mizzet, and that does mean that if you're Seth now, you pretty much have to fire off that never happened, just in case.
Yeah, just to see what's going on. Seth does have another counterspell and Devious Cover-Up, so he might want to hold that, but I'm sure he's definitely very afraid of the Niv Mizzet potentially coming down the following turn. And now he gets to see the hand of Javier Dominguez, which is Darkblade Agent, City Watch Sphinx, Devious Cover, and a Blood Operative. I think Javier might be struggling a little bit with his mana. Only one Swamp, so he can't deploy the Blood Operative, which would be quite nice on the board in the previous turns.
Now that Seth is aware of Devious Cover-Up, how much does he actually need to think about taking it? Is it a powerful enough card that it's worth getting rid of regardless?
Possibly here. It really depends on what else is in Seth's deck and how he wants to shape this game, because all those cards actually look scary. The City Watch Sphinx is just a great blocker, even though it does get dealt with by the House of Mage if it ever attacks. But yeah, there's just a bunch of good cards. It's a really hard decision for Seth Manfield here, which card to take.
I mean, that's why we love this game, right? If all of the decisions were easy all the time, then it wouldn't quite be Magic the Gathering as we know and love it. And here we see it is the Sphinx that gets taken here. That's the card that's actually going to potentially deal a bit of damage for Dominguez, maybe even stop the attacks coming from Manfield. Because right now, Manfield's done a very good job of getting getting Javier Dominguez down to just 8 points of life.
Yeah. Now the Darkblade Agent will kind of stop the bleeding. Ooh, but together with Nightveil Sprite, that something that is very nice on the attacking side of things, and Seth was tapped out from the Never Happened, so now with just the Devious Cover-Up, he needs to draw something real good here, because otherwise the Sprite, Darkblade Agent, Disinformation Campaign will just rip apart his hand and draw Javier just a bunch of cards.
Yeah, it's a beautiful little limited combo that we've got going on here. Nightveil Sprite plus the Disinformation Campaign is a lot of card drawing, a lot of discard. And then you throw in the fact that you've also now got effectively an Ophidian in play that's drawing you a few cards as well, and one with Death Touch at that.
Ooh, but big draw from Javier. Now he gets the Thought Erasure. Seth, we talked about discard spells in game one. Now both players are showing up, and Thought Erasure will be able to take care of that Devious Cover-Up in Seth's hand. Actually, Seth might decide to counter the Thought Erasure, but he just knows that he's not in that great of shape against this board from Javier, especially because Javier has the Devious Cover-Up of his own, and Seth knows about it.
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, both of these decks just utter powerhouses. Don't forget that we've got the Big Dragon in Niv Mizzet. We've seen Planeswalker from Seth. Didn't really achieve too much because it got hit by discard earlier on in game one, but both of these decks, they've got card drawing, they've got the bombs, and the fact that they've been matched up against each other is just a gift for all of us watching wherever you are in the world.
Yeah, now so Seth goes for the Devious Cover-Up on the Thought Erasure. Now Javier has to think if he wants to counter back. I think he does, but we'll see what he decides, because look at him, he knows it's a tough decision, and he just showed his teammate, like, look what I have. If he covers the Devious Cover-Up, that also means that he'll get to Thought Erasure set for his last card if it's land. But okay, we're gonna have a bit.
How much of a concern is that Devious Cover-Up lets Seth shuffle things in as well?
Interesting. So yeah, possibly like there's some decent cards in Seth's graveyard. There's the Never Happened that he's actually shuffling back, which I'm surprised, because I do like Sinister Sabotage. And the others, and we'll get a thorough shuffle from Seth there. So he puts all the spells in his hand. So
Dominguez, yeah, he would have had to completely tap out to use that Devious cover-up, and I guess that he's aware that there's still potentially going to be other things that he wants to stop.
yeah, now he attacked with the Sprite and the Darkblade Agent. Yeah, chump block from Seth so that Javier doesn't draw a card, and at least Javier was able to pick up the Disinformation Campaign. The reason I think he didn't counter back with the Devious cover-up, he's probably maybe scared of something big coming from the top of Seth's deck, so he probably wants to set up Disinformation Campaign plus Devious cover-up in one of the following turns. But we'll see. Maybe Javier will be tempted by the Notion Rain that is played now, and indeed he is. He didn't know, of course, that if he had countered back the Devious cover-up on the previous turn, he would have been able to Thought Rage the Notion Rain back. That gets countered. Nothing gets shuffled back in. And what did Seth Manfield draw for his turn?
We'll find out in just a moment. So, all right, we have a Watcher in the Mist.
Okay, that's nice. So he's going to use the House Guild Mage to keep the Darkblade Agent tapped. Maybe the Nightveil Sprite, actually, yeah. Because that triggers Surveil turn after turn. It's probably more of a threat for Seth at this point. That's a great game of Magic, though. I really enjoy these, what I like to call them, Grixis mirror matches, even though I would call the Javier's deck really like straight blue, black, red. I mean, it seems like he has a bunch of cards from all three colors, whereas Seth is more of a focused Dimir deck with just a small splash for Ral that we saw in Game 1.
Okay, so different Disinformation Campaign now means that Seth Manfield living off the top of his deck while plenty of cards flowing for Javier Dominguez. He is down on life, but that not too much of a worry, as Capture Sphere means that now there are no remaining threats on Seth's side of the battlefield. And at this point, it seems like there's going to be quite a lot of work for Seth Manfield if he's going to get back in this game too.
Yeah, I mean, Javier now has all the tools to win the game. He has the Nightveil Sprite, the Darkblade Agent, Disinformation Campaign, card advantage combination. He can draw a lot of cards, but we also know he has a Blood Operative in his hand. And yeah, that's just enough damage. And Seth is just saving some time because he knows he won't be able to win this game.
Yep, smart play there from Seth Manfield, just giving himself the time to potentially get through a Game 3, because there's a slightly different set of time concerns when you're playing teams than there is when you're playing just on your own. As by far the most experienced member of Team USA, if Seth Manfield can finish his match a little bit quicker, that means that he's got all that much more bandwidth to potentially help out his teammates in their games. And so there he says, all right, you know what, yes, you're going to be drawing multiple cards a turn, you're going to be recurring a Disinformation Campaign, the life totals are pretty close, but your board is far ahead. Let's let ourselves have a chance of winning a Game 3 and potentially of helping out our teammates. And Tony Ramos Pascual looks like he's done it again. There is a copy of Aurelia in play, and while all of the colors of mana available on the other side of the battlefield for Dylan Brown, I'm not sure how much any of those three is going to help in the face of this Angel. The life total's currently sky high thanks to a couple of Centaur Peacemakers, but that's not going to last.
Yeah, I mean, it looks great, right? You have an Aurelia. What else is going on? But the fact is that Tony Ramos Pascual has a bunch of lands still in his hand. He does have some combat tricks, but he really wants creatures that he can mentor on with that Aurelia and take to the skies. And now we see kind of the issue that Conclave Tribunal will deal with the Aurelia, and I think now Dylan Brown will be able to really control this game with his creature. And I believe he has some other cards to follow. Look at his hand stack. It's 5 spells. I saw an Izoni there as well. He's doing rather well here.
I really like the Centaur Peacemaker in this particular matchup. The Boros deck, it wants to be getting in early damage and then finishing things off. And letting both players gain a bunch of life, completely fine in that scenario. You've got a gigantic body that can stand in the way of pretty much anything the Boros deck's going to put down early, and you have a life total buffer to make sure you hit the mid and the late game.
Yeah, so while Tony was able to deal with the Peacemaker with the intervention part of Integrity Intervention, but I think there's Dylan Brown has a very solid late game plan. I just saw in his hand a Vivid Revival, which is a 5-mana source that you can return 3 multicolored cards to your hand. He already has 2 in his graveyard, and I'm sure his deck is chock full of multicolored spells because he's playing 3 colors after all in his white, green, black list. Okay, he's just going straight for those Peacemakers it's going to buffer up his life total even further and just allow him to really deploy his board. He just needs lands. He has 7 cards. Look at that.
I mean, Ramos Pascal in kind of a weird spot because he's got lands. The cards in his hand all very reactive. He's able to do a fair amount of removal of opposing creatures, but right now, the Selesnya deck, it doesn't need to be being particularly complicated in what it's doing. It's throwing down a couple more Peacemakers, and to be honest, like, are they high priority targets to kill? I mean, I guess if they're the only creatures on the battlefield, they kind of are, but Tony here, he's not advancing his position to actually win the game.
Yeah, this is kind of like the worst spot to be in if you're a Boros player. Like, you don't have creatures, you just have, like, he just drew another planes, of which he has quite a few already. He does have some direct current things going on. Okay, drew a Luminous Bond the turn before. At least he's not going to die anytime soon, even though 36 life is quite a lot. And that's all Dylan's doing. But Dylan has so much going on in his hand that he should be able to take big chunks out of the life total very soon.
Yeah, the Centaur Peacemaker, being a 3/3 for 3, a relatively efficient body, and able to start swinging in. And here comes a Gargoyle that, let's see how many gates we have in play. Looks like it's just the 2, one for Golgari, one for Selesnya. That means the biggest creature on the battlefield, somewhat unsurprisingly, on the Selesnya side.
It's the artifact Mahamoti-Jin. Kind of like 6 mana, 5/5 or 6/6 usually. So that's quite close to the really famous blue key staple card.
So this one looks like it might take a little bit of time to come to fruition. So we're going to get a chance to see a little bit more of our world champion against our very, very nearly player of the year in Seth Manfield. Just going to reset to that. Make sure that these guys recognize that we're on camera for them. They're quite enjoying watching their teammates play, I'm sure. But we would quite like to have a look at them playing.
Yeah.
Seems reasonable enough.
They have their opening hands ready, so they just need to get the signal to start playing this game 3 between the 2 world champions, with Javier Dominguez being the most recent one. Look at that. Steam Vent from Seth Manfield.
Even got the Steam Vents. Why not?
He also has Watery Grave.
It's one of those things where if you were playing a regular sealed deck, so if you were just opening the packs for just one person, opening those lands might not actually feel like that big a benefit. You'd rather open a really impactful rare. But in Team Sealed, it's meaning that Seth Manfield, he can splash that RAL very, very comfortably indeed. And here we see the early Thought Erasure just having a good old look, and it's a pretty good hand that Seth has going on here. Devious Cover-Up, Whisper Agent, and then a Deadly Visit in there as well.
Yeah.
Something for every stage in the game, and it's up to Dominguez to decide what he's most concerned with.
Yeah, he goes for the Whisper Agent, which I'm a little bit surprised giving his hand, because I thought I saw double Deadweight in his hand. So he might be saving it for maybe a Darkblade Agent or something similar. But he goes for the Whisper Agent, which does add the most immediate damage to the board. And of course, it takes a turn for you to get rid of it with that Deadweight because of the flash.
Now, one of my questions for you, Matej, we've seen these decks squaring off against each other a couple of times. In Game 1, Manfield felt like he was ahead based on his ability to deploy counter magic well. In Game 2, he was almost moving to more of a beatdown plan in some respects. He was the one getting early creatures on the board. My question to you is, in this matchup, who is or perhaps should be the beatdown?
Yeah, I mean, this is a game kind of on a few levels. So the level 1 is basically the beatdown. So if one player doesn't manage to stabilize the onboard situation, then easily the early creatures can win over the game because of your late game counterspell, being able to protect your guys from big blockers or removal spells and so on. But if the board stabilizes, it's just about the person who has the card drawing, has the mana to deploy all his potential threats and answers. And so it's always, I can't give you one straight answer. It just really depends on how the game is playing out. And Seth is actually going for the beatdown plan, and I think the removal suite from Javier will be able to take hold of this game, and we're going to see at least one of these Deadweights taking care of the House Guild Mage first.
Yeah, I guess House Guild Mage and Dimir Spybug have the potential to become quite a nasty little combo. That Spybug getting bigger with each and every surveil.
Yeah, I mean, Javier has double Thought Rage, which is just so good in this matchup, and look at that. Now he's able to take away the Devious Cover-Up from Seth, surveil some more, and just get some more good cards in hand. And he still has even double Capture Sphere in his hand to take care of any creatures that Manfield might play. he keeps on ignoring that deadly visit because it looks like Javier is just not worried at all about his creatures dying. He just wants to stabilize the board, build up his card advantage engines, and hopefully take over the game in the long term, because he has some really good late game cards. There's Niv Mizzet, and we already saw Guild Summit in the previous game.
Chemist's Insight here, just throwing it down. Why wait? Let's have a couple more cards.
Oh, and draws Dimir Guildgate. Perfect, perfect setup. Look at his hand. He also has Disdainful Stroke. I mean, if Javier doesn't die to some beatdown here, he's going to be stabilized very easily here.
So it's a mountain and another land in there as well. Goes for the dead weight now on the Spybug. Just make sure that that one's not going to get in for too many little points of chip damage.
Yeah, and we know that Seth has a Deadly Visit in his hand, also a dead weight. But now I think Javier is just trying to focus on keep up mana as much as possible, so that he has that Disdainful Stroke.
But have a look. Ral Izzet Viceroy in hand for Seth Manfield. So this is an interesting card, because it won't die to any of the creature removal. The thing that Manfield needs to worry about is how much counter magic might there be on the other side of the battlefield.
Yeah.
I mean, do you just throw down this Planeswalker and hope, or do you maybe wait a little bit until you feel like you can defend it?
Yeah, that's the question. Seth knows himself how much he boarded. Maybe he's going to want to wait for a Never Happened or something similar. But we know that Dominguez does have the Disdainful. He goes for it, and now Dominguez will blow him out with that counterspell. Down goes the Planeswalker without ever really impacting the board in any way. And I think now Dominguez, he might slap down the City Watch Sphinx, but he knows that if he does, then Seth will just Deadly Visit it and set up his following turn. So he might just play a little bit slower here. Hey, what's going on here?
There's Chemist's Insight in the graveyard, so the jump start on that pretty tempting. It looks like Javier feels that way. It's amazing how many top-level pros really enjoy drawing cards. There may be some sort of a correlation there.
Yeah, it's hardly a surprise. But now, after Javier doing this, Seth Manfield can do whatever he likes, but he doesn't have anything. Javier knows that in Seth's hand there's the Deadly Visit. Seth also added Artful Takedown and Deadweight, and this Dimir Informant is not going to add the beatdown to the board.
Yeah, it's been an interesting situation because Dominguez had so much information in the early game about what was in Manfield's hand. He's been able to get virtual card advantage by just not playing out creatures. All the creature removal that Manfield sat on has just been sat there doing absolutely nothing. And in the meantime, Dominguez has just been able to develop his hand quite a bit here. Capture Sphere then being played down on a Darkblade agent. One of the ways that potentially Manfield might have dealt some damage, drawn a few cards.
Yeah. So now we got a Niv Mizzet in the house, but he's stopping Swamp, so that means he's not about to play it. He's going to go for the City Watch Sphinx first. He's going to try to bait out a removal spells for the Sphinx here, while leaving up enough mana to at least bluff the Devious Cover-Up of his own. And then maybe hoping that next turn he can slam down the Niv Mizzet, and Seth is not going to have a removal spell for that.
A control deck with more cards in hand, more lands in play, and more powerful threats on the battlefield.
Yep.
That's the reason the advantage bar across to the right, in spite of the fact that life totals might suggest that things going the other way.
Ooh, no removal spell from Seth. He's actually being quite patient here. Goes for the Artful Takedown here.
I mean,
for thought for Javier.
Dominguez isn't even going to get Surveil here, you know.
I mean, sure, but one of the things that actually happens quite often in these matches is getting decked. That's why the Devious Cover-Up is so important. That allows you to shuffle back in a bunch of really good cards. Disdainful Stroke in this case.
It's interesting to me deciding exactly how much to shuffle in, because I know that for me with Devious Cover-Up, I'm always tempted to shuffle in the full 4 if I've got any cards that I think might be impactful there, though. But the likes of Thought Erasure, which seemed so powerful early on, he leaves them in the graveyard here.
Yeah, and I just like what Javier is doing here. He's basically sculpting a plan, right? He's presenting his City Watch Sphinx as this big threat, forcing Seth now to deal with it with that Deadly Visit. Javier will get a surveil off of this as well, and he can untap into that Niv Mizzet. Did he? I mean, I think he saw 2 spells on top, but he's going to keep one, and now he can slam down. Yeah. Okay.
It's not a scry.
It's surveil. Yeah. Goes into the leapfrog. Goes into your graveyard, and so now look at that Niv Mizzet with a counter backup. He actually drew the Disdainful Stroke that he shuffled back in just only a moment ago, and so he won't have Devious cover-up backup because he doesn't have enough blue sources, but he at least has a disdainful stroke. And now Niv Mizzet crashing on this board, and that's the win condition you want to have.
Yeah, and it says something that he's just sat right in the middle of the red zone over that Planeswalker symbol there. I mean, when we talk about counter backup for Niv Mizzet, you don't need it to be able to resolve the big dragon. It's more about keeping him alive so that you can get a good few spells off. So each and every time that Dominguez draws a card, he gets to shoot something for 1 damage. Often we might find that to be Seth Manfield himself. Every time either player plays a spell, that's more cards, more damage that's racking up. And I don't anticipate this game lasting a whole lot longer.
No, definitely not. And it just looks like with 2 counter spells in Dominguez's hand, plus a bunch of other stuff, that there's going to be at least some stuff drawn out of Niv Mizzet. And I just don't know what Seth Manfield can do in this situation. He doesn't want a Whispering Snitch off of that Surveil with the Whisper Agent. He's probably digging for some removal. Maybe he's going to try to race here, but that's not a plan against Javier, who has been holding on to double capture Sphere like for a very long time, and now deploy both, and just a ping for 1 with the Informant.
Yeah, the Informant, that one can get involved. A dead weight here being played on Niv Mizzet. None of these enchantments really synergizing too well with Niv Mizzet, but I mean, Niv is a 3/3. Potentially that saves Seth Manfield a whole turn. I guess we'll find out. He's got to do what he can. Worth noting that on our bottom table, it was ultimately Dylan Brown picking up the win against Tony Ramos Pascual. Once he was able to get past Aurelia, that was good enough. So the first match win going to America. If they can find a win on either this table or the match between Justin Andrus and Alexander Calado, that will be enough for USA to get through it. But Dominguez picking up the win in the middle here, meaning that we have a decider.
Yeah, game 3, Justin Andrus against Alex Cabello, and it's going to be interesting. It's the classic Boros against Golgari matchup. And look, they're swinging. The Sunhome Stalwart and Void Bodyguard, they each have already counters on them, and doesn't look like the Golgari deck has much going on.
Yeah, it looks like we've had a pump spell or two that's meant that these mentor creatures, large and in charge here, though Assassin's Trophy will be enough to take down one of these creatures, and conveniently enough, when Wojak Bodyguard doesn't have anyone to protect, to mentor, he just doesn't get involved.
Yeah, not that much, not that many cards in Justin Andrus' hand, because he already deployed quite a bit in the early turns. I see Fresh Faced Recruit and Gird for Battle that were played, and those are great at the start of the game, but now will Callado find a way to stabilize here? I mean, we do see a Parhelion Patrol and a Directorine in his hand. The Bodyguard and Patrol are a decent combo of its own. It looks like Callado only has an Okapi in his hand. That doesn't look great, but a removal spell here for the Patrol would be insane.
Kral Foragers there, I think, the pickup, which is both frustrating because it's not going to be able to be cast, but also because it really doesn't deal with the key threats that are coming on the other side of things here.
Yeah, now is the Centipede attacking here?
Yeah, this is a tough.
Yeah, very tough. Because Cairo can play the Okapi, but then he has to like double trade his 2 3/2s against the 4/4 Bodyguard, and he would still take 3 from the Patrol in the air. Ugh, just awkward. He might try to like just chump block with the Bodyguard and put the counters on the Okapi. So just not a good long-term play against a flyer.
Yeah, Parhelion Patrol as a 2/3 flyer, it's fine, it's solid.
Yeah.
The Mentor ability triggers from time to time.
Yeah.
As soon as you have even one additional counter on it, thanks to Mentor, it becomes much, much scarier. 3/4 flyer, Vigilance, a potent, consistent threat that also fairly reliably will be putting counters on your other creatures as well at some point.
Yeah, so actually Direct Current taking care of the Okapi, and the Vine actually had to chump block. Something like you don't really want to do, but at least it adds a creature to the graveyard. So now that Callado has drawn a land, he can deploy the Foragers, gain a bunch of life back, and at least a swing with the Centipede. Okay, just passes. Interesting.
The shadow of the flags here, almost looking like a Grim Reaper's scythe on Callado's side of things. As, yeah, Lava Coil consistently clearing a path here, getting rid of the biggest blocker available to Callado. And his centipede, looking a little sad in the face of these attackers on the other side of things, just has to jump in the way of that Wojciech bodyguard. But in the meantime, 4 points of damage coming through in the air. Collado drawing for the life of himself and his team here, as his teammate, as Dylan Brown has already picked up a match win. If Andres can pick up a win here.
Okay, we're doing it. Crawl Harpooner takes care of the patrol. Now the bodyguard cannot attack. Oh, never mind.
Sky Knight Legionnaire off the top. It's got haste. It's getting pumped by the bodyguard. It gets in alongside Wojciech bodyguard, and that means that Team USA, after having had a tough old match in the middle there, able to win it out. These guys, wow, they really had to fight back. It was going to be a tough one between Javier Dominguez and Seth Manfield. We had a knockdown, drag-out fight there. Absolutely fantastic control match to see. But ultimately, it was the two other World Magic Cup debutants in Justin Andres and Dylan Brown able to put it together. We will have a little bit more magic for you in some deciders soon enough. Do not go anywhere. But first, these messages.
Welcome back. Rich joined here, of course, by Tim and Matej. More commentary for you gentlemen coming right up because it's decider time here in round 2. We're going to take you down to a match in progress. This is Slovakia against Slovenia. They built their decks right next to each other this morning. This is Ivan Floch captaining the Slovak team. And Matej, you've got an interest in this one. So here we go. It is the deciding match, and we're going to start with Robin Dola 1-0 up. So here with the call, Tim and Matej.
Yeah, Robin Dola and Richard Hornansky here, Slovenia versus Slovakia. And this is an unusual matchup where we've got a team captain who wasn't on the center seat. They've slightly mixed up the seating around here, so we didn't see Ivan Floch versus Robin Dola. Robin Dola instead gets to be within our deciding matchup here.
Yeah, and as with the team captains in this round that we saw Javier Dominguez and Seth Manfield, look at Dimir Guildgate into Mountain, like a typical 3-color control deck in the hands of the captain. Not surprised. These games go long, you need your best players onto that. Just to clear things up, Slovakia and Slovenia are not neighboring countries. We're not rivals. We're both of Slavic origin, but there's really no rivalry between us, despite the very similar name, of course. There's a bit of similarity in language, but that's basically about it. We're mostly jealous that they have access to the sea, and we're landlocked.
Fair enough. And you're going to be relatively unbiased in this matchup, I take it then.
I'm going to try to, but it's very difficult for me because as a Slovak myself, I'm going to root for our boys. They lost the first round to the English team, something that's relevant to you, Tim. But now at least a decent start from Richard there with the diff card, and this is already attacking. And I'm pretty sure Ivan Floch is at the table giving instructions about what to do, because that's what he does.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what happens when it gets to the latter games within a team matchup. Here we have the other 2 matches have already been completed, one going to each side for Slovenia and Slovakia respectively, meaning that it all comes down to this. Ultimately, whichever team wins this match is going to win the match in total, and that means essentially we've kind of got a 3-on-3 on our hands here.
Yeah. The dreaded 3-headed giant facing off against another 3-headed giant.
I mean, when it comes to 2-headed giant, Hornansky, of course, won a 2-headed giant GP back in the day.
It is actually true, yes. That's back in 2007 in Amsterdam. I was there. It was a wild ride.
And a couple of 2-2s just trading off here, and that potentially favouring the deck that gets to have the beatdown on here as we get a Ledev champion there coming along, potentially able to get plenty more creatures into play. But on the other side of things, a rare big old body from the 3-color deck that we have on the other side of things in Rampaging Monument. Starts off as a 3/3 with trample, and it's only going to be getting bigger with each and every gold spell that gets cast.
Yeah, Rosemane Centaur though on turn 4 for Hornansky. Thanks to the Ledev champion convoking it out. But there's still Robin Dola. If he manages to play some multi-colored spell, it can easily outgrow the size of the Rosemane Centaur.
Rosemane Centaur, really one of the linchpin cards for the Selesnya deck. It desperately wants to be deploying big, powerful creatures on or ahead of curve, and this is the one where all the numbers stack up just perfectly. It's a convoke creature that's just such a big body that it can largely get through most things, though Hypothesizal might have something to say about that.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite sequences that you can manage in Guilds of Ravnica Limited. It's the Rampaging Monument into Hypothesizal, because that guarantees you draw cards, you grow the monument, and plus you get to get rid of something on the board and swing unimpeded. It's just a great sequence of turns, and now Richard already like motioning to his teammates, like there's nothing I could have done about this one.
Yeah, and there's some stuff you can play around, some not. And when you're playing against a 3-color deck with so many instant and sorceries to be able to potentially remove creatures, it's hard to play around everything. Robin Dola here, though, with the biggest threat on the battlefield, which feels almost a little unfair for the deck that normally I would classify as being the control deck.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, Robin just doing a great job of keeping up with the card advantage, not falling behind on the board. Let's see what... Okay, so just a 1/1 lifelinker, and now he's going to tap his soldier, make it into a 3/3. That was quite a poor turn from the Slovak team here. I'm trying to be unbiased, but I'm very disappointed here.
Have to send a little memo afterwards. But yeah, I mean, that was a situation where essentially you spent 5 mana for an additional point of damage and potentially a body on the board at some point. But against the trample of this monument, the 1/1 wasn't going to be much of a blocker anyway.
Yeah, true.
And Notion Rain here meaning that Rampaging Monument rampaging is an accurate word. It's only getting bigger. It's only getting scarier. And this Notion Rain, while it might cost Robin Dolar a couple of points of life, I don't think he's going to mind. He's going to get his Surveil on. He's going to get his cards. And he's going to get to pump that monument.
Yeah, he kept both because those cards were Disdainful Stroke and Artful Takedown. So that just now means that Robin has 2 mana open for Disdainful Stroke if Hornansky plays anything big in his on his turn. He can just counter that and keep swinging with the monument. That's a very quick way to close out a game with from a control deck.
Well, I mean, at this point, I have to say I'm hopeful that Team Slovakia has some good standard decks on hand because right now things do not seem to be working out so well for them in the limited portion of this Our World Magic Cup. Of course, when it comes to how you do on day one, it's all about survival. If you get those 4 wins, it's not really the end of the world if you get them largely in the constructed rounds. But ideally, you kind of want to have the buffer of picking up a win or 2 somewhere in the limited.
Look at that. March of Multitudes for 5 tokens. That's going to get Disdainful Stroked.
Oof.
Yeah, it would have been sweet to get so many lifelink tokens.
Yeah, this is going to be a rough one.
Yeah, it is quite rough here. And we know Robin Dolar actually is that Knife Concoct as well. He can actually steal a creature, grow his... Okay, I don't know who chose this match, but if they're just needling me, then I feel very offended.
This has been a pretty one-sided game that we've seen thus far. Oh look, a Nightveil Predator. That's another way of pumping your monument and indeed really presenting a problematic creature on the table. Flying, Death Touch, Hexproof. That combination of abilities, very potent indeed. It may well be that simply the fact that it's a 3/3 already good enough. A 6/6 Rampaging Monument at this point, plus mana up to potentially interact with whatever it is that Hornansky has going on. 5 life to work with. What can he draw here?
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything. I'm just going to keep it real for this one. Just in general, the blue decks are actually quite good against slower green-based decks, either green-white or green-black. And so I'm not surprised that Hornansky is actually losing in this game, but it's still quite disappointed. Their draw was okay, but it wasn't anything spectacular. And already putting together a combination of Celestia and Boros is just not great. Yeah, my good buddy, who we call Richard, actually has a nickname. We call him 50.
Yeah.
Fans back home will know. It's a very obscure reference that I'm not going to get into here, but he's well known. He's been playing for a really long time. Actually played at Team Worlds before, and he was part of teams before. And plus, he has that GPU, and he's a decent player when he puts his mind to it. But I don't think there's much he could have done in this spot.
Yeah, it's been a tough old matchup, and Robin Dolar's deck seems very well suited to be able to do what it needs to. And you can see the hand of Ivan Flocker. He's hit the point where he's just like, look, these lands, they tap for mana, they're going to cast spells, and this is what they're going to cast. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
And Robin Dolar says, well, you might think that, but unfortunately for you, I do have another Disdainful Stroke, and that kind of means that you're not going to win this game. I'm sorry about that.
It's, I think Ivan is a bit of a control freak, and I do mean it in both senses.
In more ways than one,
I mean it in both senses, yeah. So I'm not surprised he started micromanaging Richard a little bit here, because as I know Richard, he's actually like very jovial, likes to joke around, and Ivan just is not humored by these sort of things.
Yeah, this looks to be a tough old start for Slovakia here, though. Slovakia has got pedigree at this World Magic Cup. They have the potential to put something together going back. An Artful Takedown in response to the pump spell from Hornansky is enough to finally get the handshake from Team Slovakia as Slovenia pick up their first win of the tournament. They advance to 1-1. So unfortunately for you, Matej, well,
it happens.
At least there's only one more round of Sealed, and they'll be able to break out the standard decks, potentially string something together once we hit that stage of the tournament. But for now, at least, a little bit of a rough one for them. I guess maybe we'll go and have a little chat to them afterwards, see if we can console them a little bit. But for now, that is the end of our round 2. Do not go anywhere. We will have more Magic for you from our World Magic Cup. The final round of Sealed Deck coming to you right after these messages.